what I was saying. Welcome to the Finding Wisdom Show. My name is Linda Singh, and I have a very special show for you today. But before I have with me a very special guest, as you know, this is the month for domestic awareness, domestic violence. I'm here with the survivor. Her name is Sukri Budrum. She's the president and founder of CADVA. If you're not familiar with CADVA, CADVA is a Caribbean American Domestic Violence Awareness, and she has written a book also called Breakout. She's going to tell us today her story and what she went through to with her experience with domestic violence and how she gained the strength and the courage to step out and get out of this abusive relationship. But before I go to talking to Sukri Budrum, I also have with me Pandit Ram Ratan, who is also a guest on our show. And he is going to give us a little bit of insight from a religious aspect, being a Pandit, on what's going on in the community and how families and people are affected today with this domestic violence. It is very it's growing rapidly, and more you're hearing stories of women going through this, and there's there's really a need for change, for us to really stand up for our rights. Um, if you're a woman that's going through any of these, I'm gonna give a list of a few things that you may be going through. Please give CADVA a call. The phone number for CADVA, we will let you know that number in a minute. Sukri will give us that number to call. But these are some signs that may make you aware of if you're a victim. Someone teases you in a hurtful way in private or in public. Call you names such as stupid or bitch. Acts jealous of your friends, family, or coworkers. Makes fun of you, your friends, or your activities. Gets angry about the clothes you wear or how you style your hair. Checks on you by calling, driving, or by getting someone else to. Goes places with you or sends someone just to keep an eye on you. Blames you for his problems or his bad mood. Accuses you of being interested in someone else. Force you to touch their private areas without your consent. Force you to have sex when you don't want to. Force you to have sex in ways that you do not want to. Threatens to kill you or themselves if you leave them. Acts one way in front of other people and a different way when they're alone with you. Hi, Sukri. Thank
Hi.
you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Can you tell, since I just started up with the show talking about these different examples of what a person is going through, what is the number if someone, from what I just read, is going through any of those things? What is the number they can call before we start?
Well, first of all, there's two phone numbers. I'll give it out. Area code 407-404-0331. There's another number, 917-399-5764. But more than that, you could go to, somebody viewing would go to www.cadva.org, and all the information they would need to contact us is on that website, and a lot of other information. And the steps, the signs that you've just gone through is also on the website, along with steps to recovery, where help is available in your local area. So again, it's www.cadva.org. And also you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and some of the other social media as well.
I have to ask you, what inspired you? I realized after reading some parts of the book, what inspired you to write this book and to tell your story?
I would say, if I have to pick one thing, I would say pain. Pain inspired me to put my story in a diary, because at the time when I was going through these situations and the abuse, I did not speak to anyone about it. I kept it secret. But the pain was so much that I decided that, you know what, I'm just going to write things down as they happen, just to get it out of me. And when I started to come out of the abusive situation, I got very lonely, and I decided to put what I had written in my diary in a Word document. And little by little, I started to get stronger, and I realized I had kept so much secret from my family, my friends, people who could help me. And there was so much help available at my hand reach that I didn't know of, that I learned of later through law enforcement, through friends, through group support, through counselors, through rehab clinics, that I said to myself, you know, I have a fiduciary duty to share that knowledge with my public, my community. I come from a very conservative Hindu family, and we were taught to keep what happens behind closed doors, don't let anyone know. But I realized what happened behind my closed door, I wanted people to know, because if I didn't let anybody know, then the cycle will continue. I have 2 kids, and they will follow what I have done. My kids will learn from me, and maybe my daughter will end up with an abuser. Maybe my son will become an abusive alcoholic. So I said to myself, I am going to publish my story, and I'm going to speak to it, and I will let others know that it's okay to not be silent. If you're being beaten emotionally, physically, mentally, or sexually, or financially abused, it's not okay. It's no longer acceptable. I'm not going to keep quiet about it. And I took a chance, and I published my story. So it was a lot of pain that drove that to start.
Wow, that's it's very deep. Pendant Remember
Yes, I read her book somewhat, and I was very fascinated with it. Now, let's go back in the beginning. We'll come back to the abuse later on, but let's talk about your youth. You said in your book that you were very, very happy with your father. It was a distressing situation because he was ill and he was disabled, but yet you found joy and happiness in that. And I wonder if that has had an impact on your life today. The happiness you enjoyed in a sad situation, and of course your life today as an adult. How would you reflect on those days?
Well, I felt, if I have to go back, and again, if you read the book, you know my dad gave me the inspiration. And my dad used to say to me when we were little, he says, never forget where you came from, because if you do, you'll always forget where you're going. And I came from a family that was very close, very loving. I ended up getting married to someone who I was in love with, as you read, a wonderful love story, but he abused me.
Yes.
So in order to stay and have hope, hope is one thing a victim wants to have, but sometimes we don't have the courage to get there. So I used to go back and think about the times when we used to play hide and seek and play cards, and my dad used to tell the worst ghost stories ever, and he used to make them up. And we used to be so happy as kids, and that happiness as children was pure. It wasn't abusive, and I think that kept me together. And I'm blessed today that he was in my life for 13 years. He was disabled since I was 4. But his words keep ringing in the back of my head all the time. Is, you know, he used to tell me, you'll travel the world, you'll marry the best guy, you'll have everything. He used to tell me that.
But that was just to keep you in the family.
Yeah, but you know,
but he was a subtle teacher. He taught you indirectly most of the times.
And I attribute a lot to what I learned and my strength to him today, absolutely today. So I was able to bring that and tie it back to where I was today. But thank you for asking, and it's a great observation.
Yeah, the other thing that fascinated me was your love story. I've been down that road, and I want you to talk about it. A lot of gynaes watching this program will realize that, yes, I've been there. I love that girl. I love that fella. And the feeling was phenomenal. It was overwhelming. And of course, it was beautiful, though. Very, very beautiful.
And I'm glad, because you've been talking about that love story for a while off set. It was a beautiful love story. Someone I met when I was fairly young, right out of high school, and I fell in love. I truly fell in love with this individual I was married to. And I feel in some ways he was in love with me as well. And I used to hear from people who knew him that, you know, that boy is not good for you. He drinks quite a bit. He has some bad ways. He's not going to make you happy. He's kind of lazy, and he's like a ladies' man, or these things come up. And when you're in love, you don't listen.
Yes.
And even my mother told me, and I had to admit this in my book, that I had to admit my mother said, I don't think he's a good match for you. And I said, what do you know? I love him. That's the one I want to marry. And I realize now that if I have to give my daughter the same advice that my mother gave, maybe I wouldn't say it in the way that my mother did, you can't marry that boy. Maybe I would say, listen, this is your life. Here's where you are. Here's where this person is. You know, you don't have to do what I told you to do, or I'm telling you. But some things are true, and maybe you need to look into. If I'd only had that knowledge at 20, you know, 15, 16 years old, to go in and find out, did he really drink a lot? Does he get a drunken stupor at age 20? Maybe by chance, I'm not saying Panditji that I would have not married him. Maybe I would have said to myself, you know what? Maybe it's not a good match. So I blamed myself and take responsibility that I did learn about him drinking. I did learn about him getting drunk and getting into fights. That's a fact. But you know what? Like you said earlier off show, love is blind, dumb, and deaf.
Deaf, yeah.
And I fell into that category.
I was going to bring that up to you about your daughter, yeah.
See no evil, speak no evil. But
Definitely.
I realize now that that's part of the knowledge I can share. When your parent, if young girls are listening, when your parent says, you know what, just step back. Maybe they don't know how to dialogue it, but please listen, because they are older and they're wiser, and they may not be trained like us to speak.
But let me come in there a minute. You know, when you're talking to a young person, someone who's an adolescent, they have conflicts, they have issues, they have the awakening, the sexual awakening. They have, they don't know whether they're an adult or a child, because at school and in the community they're treated as an adult, or they're told, be a grown-up, look after a little child. At home, you're a child in my house, you're under my roof, you're wearing my clothes, or you're eating my food or whatever. You have to behave and you have to abide by the rules. These are conflicting issues in the brain of an adolescent. And that's one of the reasons why they don't listen to anybody. They don't want, they're blind, they're deaf, and because they're dumb.
Well,
and they're rebellious too.
Pandit Ramatan, is there a book on love? No.
You have to, there's a lot of books on love, but it has to be experienced.
Right.
Yeah.
So no one can really tell you exactly a true definition of what love is or how you should be treated.
Infatuation.
Each person has different expectations, has a different idea of what love is.
I agree.
From what they've been brought up, what they've been taught, what they've seen. So my question to you, I'm going to go back and forth with you, because there's so much from the book, that, you know, when you reach the point to realize what you're going through, did at the beginning, when the love was so good, were there subtle signs besides what people said and how he treated you?
Yes.
That you didn't realize?
There weren't subtle signs, Linda. There were glaring signs. We had planned our wedding. It was for October of 1987, and he would come home every night drunk. And I remember this clearly, and I have family members in the audience listening to this right now, and please don't take offense to this, but I left him in August. I told him I don't want to get married. Our wedding was in October. And you know the part that says an abuser acts one way in front of others, the Jekyll and Hyde personality, and act one way behind closed doors. Behind closed doors, he was a different person. And he would curse, yell, put my family down, call my sisters and mother's name. I knew that, and I knew it was wrong. So I left. I told him, here, I'm ending this. We're not going to get married. And he started to cry, and I did not feel sorry. And I remember this. I was 20 years old. He went to my brother's house where my mom was, 3 blocks away. This was in Corona, Queens. And my mother brought him back. And you know what they told me? at 20, and that's why cultural subliminal knowledge that we're taught culturally may not be spoken. We have to be very careful. My mother said to me, well, you know, you have to marry him. Everything is set. The wedding is October 3rd, and you slept with him. Nobody else is going to want you.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
this was a person that I was having sex with for the first time in my life. I came from a culture where if you have sex intercourse with someone, you actually have to marry them or end up with them.
Tradition, yeah.
And I believed in my mind at 20 years old that, you know what? Oh my God, no one will ever want me. And I buried my head and I did the wedding. 3 months after I was married, and my sister found this out the first time when she read the book, and she cried. She's sitting watching us. I had a 2-inch gash on my head. One night he came in about 1 o'clock drunk, and I said, where were you? And back then cell phone wasn't, and he backhanded me. And I flew across the bed, and the water heater with the ridge you have here in New York, my head hit. The mark is on my head today, and every time I talk about it, my hand goes to my head. It was 3 months into my marriage. I was a young bride. So no, I didn't have subtle signs, Linda. I had glaring signs. But you know what? I was so determined to upkeep my cultural values and my tradition that I said, you know what? I'm not going to let this bother me. And I told him, if it ever happens again, I will let everyone know, and I will let them know what you are. But you know what? For a long, long time, he never hit me again, because I thought then physical abuse was the only form of abuse. But then mental, emotional, verbal, financial, sexual, all those are abuse. Control, who I can see, who I can't, who can come to my house. My family, it was not pleasant if they had to come to my house, and they can attest to that.
Let me come into one of the points you made, Justice, financial. I read in the book that you were earning and he was earning, but you were earning almost twice as much as he was.
A little bit more
Was
than
this a
twice.
bit, do you think that this was a bit emasculating on his part, you know, I mean, taking away his masculinity, and the machismo in a man in a marriage is being diluted or diminished?
I would love for a man to answer that question, because I can't answer it from a male perspective. What I can answer it from a female perspective and a victim perspective. When victims are in abusive situations, they try to make it better. They try to achieve more because they feel like they're not good enough no matter what they do. So what I did, I kept going to school, I kept earning more, and hopefully that will make him happy. And I would drive these old beaten up cars. I had Toyota Previa van that would break and overheat every corner I go, but he was in a brand new truck, because if he's happy, then he wouldn't abuse me, he wouldn't yell, he wouldn't curse, he wouldn't put my family down. So whether I took away his masculinity, I would say in my situation, I think there were too much privilege on his end that may have gotten to his head.
I take your point.
But for me,
But listening to you talk, why, if a woman is successful and doing well, why should it affect him? That's his issue. That's not.
Well,
should
the
not be
general
her
cultural
issue. The cultural, exactly. Maybe our culture needs to be examined.
Right. The man is the
Because-
breadwinner, the man is the machismo in the family, the man does everything.
macho man.
Yes, and everything is taken away from him. He feels useless. He feels
Right, but that doesn't give
impotent,
him
if
the
you like,
right
for want of
to
a better
go
word.
and hurt somebody because he feels that it's okay. Let me put her down so I feel good. In a relationship, it's not supposed to be a healthy relationship.
We're not talking about what's supposed to be and what
Linda-
not supposed to be. We're talking about reality. Here is a situation where something real happened, and we don't know what the reasons are. I'm not accusing anybody or putting
No,
blame
no,
on
no,
anybody.
no.
I'm
I'm
trying to
just
find out
saying
if you
it's just,
experience any of these, and maybe we can talk about it and
but
ventilate
it's
about
fun
it.
to play devil's
Yeah.
advocate. But since my abuse, I have learned a lot about abuse. What I've learned is I was a victim of an abuser. Victims of an abuser, it doesn't matter if it's you, it's me, you're man, woman, Asian, white, American, Caucasian, African American. Abusers will abuse victims generally in the same manner, through control,
Right.
through manipulation, physically, emotionally. The patterns are all the same. So even though we're saying, okay, we're from this culture, from the Hindu culture, and it's unique to us, no, it's not unique. Because in support groups that I go to and people I talk to and counsel, they're from different cultures, but guess what? They go through the same thing. Women white American women that I that go to group with went through the exact same thing. So we've got to step out as community advocates on this and stop using our culture as an excuse, because it happens in other cultures almost alike. But what is happening in our culture, because we don't speak up like other cultures do, it's happening more prevalent in our culture. So it happens, these signs, like the power and control wheel we talked about before, is the signs you read. If you look at any type of global, and we're a global organization, CADVA is, the signs of abuse are pretty much the same. When I speak to a victim and they come up to me, and it happens all the time, Panditji, they'll come up to you and say, oh my God, I read your book and your story is exactly the same. But before I had published the book, I knew our story was exactly the same, and I knew I could relate to them. So my story, Linda, is not different from yours. If Panditji was a male abuse victim, it's not different from his, because the female abuser will exhibit the same abusive behavior. So for us, it is an education, it is an awareness, and beyond that, we now have to redefine our cultural expectations. And one of the first things, and audiences, you're listening, is we cannot be silent about this anymore. It is an epidemic. It's very pervasive.
What I found out that Guyana was one, and it really, I was very stunned. Excuse me, I have a cold. That Guyana was one of the, in the whole world, that had the most cases of domestic violence. And
suicide.
Suicide.
Third highest in the world.
Suicide rate as well. But what really gets to me is, you know, it has been happening from generations to generations, this abuse. And sometimes you'll ask an older person and they'll say, well, you know what, he hits me, it's okay, because they all do it. No, it's not okay. I don't find it okay.
Panditji, maybe you'll be able to educate us, and maybe
why is
there a generational gap in how our older generation?
Well, you know, I was going to bring you back to that point. You talk about culture and what our parents do. Gal, what people are going to say.
Right.
That's the first thing. Gal, what people are going to say.
My mother told me, for 1 year, I think I told you guys this.
Go back to your husband, yeah.
I got divorced. She knew. I told her. I told my family. And up to a year after, you know, friends will say, I hear you, Dad. I got divorced.
Yes.
She goes, I don't know. I haven't talked to her in a while.
People, the ostrich syndrome. You talk about the ostrich syndrome as well. Yeah, that's one of them. But let me say that, you know, our people. You talk about generation gap. The older folks will still hang on to their old traditions, but the new and the more educated individuals will change. We're not going to see a change immediately. It has to take a few generations for people to come to grips with it and to realize what's going on and to see the values of the old system as opposed to the American system, which most people are involved in now, which is, hey, you're going to hit me, you leave. I'll call the cops.
And I will, when you said the word change, Gandhiji, I've read his writings. He's one of my inspirations behind this book. One of the first quote that says, you must be, one of the first quote I just fell in love is, you must be the change you want to see in the world. And then the second one, really, if you do nothing, there'll be if you take no action, there'll be no result. He went on to say this, and I can attest to this, is it is more difficult to change yourself, and I'm paraphrasing, than to change the world.
Right.
So in order to, like, I could tell Linda all day long, Linda, listen, you know, you really need to leave an abuser. But if I'm still with my abuser, then I can't qualify to tell you, because I have, before I go out and try to change the world, I have to first change myself. And changing oneself, Greek philosopher says, the only thing constant in life is change.
Change, yes.
That is the only thing constant. So I have to change me, and that was not easy.
You know, explain to the audience, our viewers out there, a lot of women, they're afraid, they have fear that keeps them in the relationship, that keeps them from not leaving. They may be threatened. The person might say they're going to kill them, or they're just afraid. When did you reach that moment that you said, you know what, this is enough, I'm not taking your abuse anymore?
I've been asked that question on several occasions, and I remember clearly, my son was about 12, 13 years old, and at that time I had gotten to the really low point in my life. I had contemplated suicide. I was drinking quite a bit. I was taking prescription drugs. I was out of it, and I was tuning out the abuser. Well, abusers need a victim. So if one victim doesn't pay attention to them, they'll move on. I was in the kitchen, and he started yelling at my son and calling my son a liar. And my son looked at me, and he says, "Mom." And I turned to my son, and I said, "Don't ever let anybody make you feel like you're nothing. And always stand up to someone who puts you down." And my son turned back and stood up to his dad. And at that moment, I realized that I never want my children to feel what a victim feels, ever. That was the turning point in my life. And that's the passion that we do with CADVA every day when we go out in the community. We don't ever want a victim to feel, what we felt as victims. So that was a moment, and I will forever remember that moment, because I never want my son to know what it feels like to be put down and be at the mercy of an abuser. That was the turning point. But to answer the other part of the question with regards to fear, fear goes, it's false emotions appearing real, right? F-E-A-R, false emotions appearing real. Fear comes from a lack of courage, a lack of hope, and a lack of dream. Victims, they lack courage. I did. I didn't have any dreams that tomorrow is going to be a better day. I didn't have hope that things will improve. So the fear keeps us where we are, static. And an abuser wants you to be fearful. And that's why they say, and victims, if you're listening and you are with an abuser, and I'm not saying 100%, but whenever you try to leave an abuser, one of the first things they say, "If you leave, I can't live without you, I'm going to kill myself." Boy, I was told that so many times. Yeah. But you know, with help, and I'm going to admit this on public television, with help and counseling and guidance from people, survivors before me, I was able, one time he told me, well, if you leave, I'm going to kill myself. This is about, I was still married, and I had sought counseling from a psychiatrist who was trained to counsel victims. I was getting stronger, and he said to me once, he said, "If you leave, I'm going to kill yourself." I said, "Well, I'm so sorry, but how would you like to be buried? Burial or cremation? Just so I know." Because we hadn't talked about it. And I went on my business. But abusers will use threat, manipulation, and control to get the victim to feel fearful. Because when I was afraid he would die, I was like, "Oh my God, if he dies, my kid wouldn't have a father. Oh my God, what would people say?" They'll say, "I made him do it." And the first thing, when you'll see this in our society, and correct me if I'm wrong, when a man dies, and let's say he drank too much or he dies of alcohol, we often hear, "Well, him and his wife wasn't getting along," and it kind of alludes that the wife kind of pushes him in that area, right? But when a woman dies and she's laying in the coffin, they're very quiet. We're not hearing that, "You know, man, he just beat her black and blue, you know? He just stripped her, bounded her hand, tied her feet, wrapped her with hefty black bag and stuck her under the mattress." We don't hear that dialogue.
No, that's true.
Do you see what I'm saying?
So a point you brought up earlier on about women being blamed for a lot of the issues in a domestic violence situation. There was an old movie where Vijayanti Mala starred, and she sang a song rather, or Ratane Janam Din. You know, women are always given the blame. Men do all the wrong things in this world, and they put all the blame on the women. It's a beautiful song. I'll give you a clip of it one day. But coming back to the book, there were two issues that I would like to talk to you about. The one about your wedding. When you refused to wear a shirt and tie, and the other one when you refused to go to honeymoon. I mean, how traumatic was that? You know, here's a guy who on his wedding day preferred to be drunk with his friends as opposed to taking his beautiful wife in a limousine and a hotel that was booked with flowers and all the trimmings, you know.
What was he thinking?
Exactly. Where was his mind? And where were yours?
You took it out of my mouth because I was going to forget him. What was wrong with me?
Exactly.
I was just so much in love, dumb, blind, stupid, maybe the descriptive I would use for myself. But yes, I was getting married. Oh my God, I am going to admit this because when you read the book, you'll figure it out, right?
Yes.
I'm Sanatan Dharm, Hindu. I was supposed to get married in a maro with my
Mandap,
sari
yes.
and the
All the trimmings, yes. Trappings, yeah.
he'd never wear one of those things.
No.
And he said to me, if he had to wear one of those things, he's never going to get married to me. Boy, I wish he had said that now. But he did say that. And then the honeymoon, the limo was waiting. My sisters packed a bag. My brother booked 2 nights on the water at the Hudson River at the Sheraton. I work for Starwood now. See, I didn't work for Starwood then. I know I would have had a great time. And nope, they had to say, it was paid for. The room was
Yes, that was. I said, what the hell is going on here? You know, I should talk about hell.
But
Narak.
right there, right in your face, on your
I-
wedding night, that's so.
There's another.
I contributed to
How long?
this.
How long did you go through? Like, what was your coping mechanism? I saw in the book that you started to drink
Yeah.
Yes.
and take prescriptions. Like, how did you get to that point where you were just like, were you feeling like you were going crazy? Like you were stuck and no one could help you get out of this? And no matter how many people you try to talk to, they're like, stay in this marriage, stay in this
Yes.
marriage. And no one understood what you were going through because nobody wanted to.
I didn't tell anyone. So I graduated to drinking. I didn't start there. So you asked coping mechanism. In my book, I wrote about a self-induced syndrome called the ostrich syndrome. When things got rough,
You bury your head in the sand.
I was like, okay, I just need to go take another class, or I need to book work travel. I just need to go. And I ran away. I must have worn out running shoes. Because when I was away, I was safe. I didn't have to deal with abuse. And I was in denial that someone who loved me hurts me. I couldn't accept that emotionally. I'm a last of 13 children. I was the most loved child probably ever. I didn't understand what it's like not to be loved.